Hello and welcome to Real World News. My name is Ella Holding-McGrath and our guest today is QUT Professor Axel Bruns. Dr. Bruns is an Australian media scholar and a researcher inside the Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision Making and Society. He was also recently awarded an Australian Laureate Fellowship, which is one of the nation's highest honours. Welcome, Dr. Bruns. Let's talk about your fellowship. What exactly is it?
Yeah, the Laureate Fellowships basically are a personal award from the Australian Research Council. There are only 17 per year that are given out. They tend to go to research leaders in their fields. This is actually the first time that one was awarded in the field of media and communication. Very often they go to the STEM disciplines, the scientific disciplines. This essentially enables me now to build a team of postdocs and PhD students for a project that will investigate polarization and partisanship in Australian online media and in fact in online media beyond Australia as well.
Right. So you said you're the first from your discipline, right? How many other fellows in total were nominated?
There are only 17 per year. It's a very competitive scheme, so there's a fixed number of people, of grants that are awarded every year. Yeah, they are very, very competitive, of course.
And out of all of those 17, how many exactly are from the humanities?
Just me really this year, and very rarely are there any others in the humanities.
Why do you think there is such a small number from the humanities?
It's in part because there is, of course, very important research going on in the STEM disciplines. But in part, it's also a self-perpetuating process, of course. The more of these laureate fellows you have in STEM, the more you end up, I guess, getting in future as well. So we in the humanities have been lagging behind in getting these fellowships, and hopefully this will now help also in encouraging others in my discipline to apply for these fellowships.
It's such a huge honour, such a great opportunity. What are you planning to do with the fellowship?
Yeah, the project essentially is a project that will investigate polarization, hyperpartisanship in online media, in online discussion, online discourse. We're interested in this problem of polarization because, of course, we've seen over the last few years this is a growing issue in the world, but quite possibly also in Australia. We've seen some signs of it here in Australia. It's not certainly anywhere as bad as we've seen it over the last few years in the US and perhaps in the UK as well, and some other countries. But it is a problem that we need to be aware of, that we need to prepare for, because polarization, hyperpartisanship, divisions in society around political and other topics can be incredibly damaging, of course. They ultimately undermine good governance, they undermine societal cohesion. And of course, when that happens, you very quickly see the fabric of society itself actually starting to fall apart.
And with this polarization, what are the driving factors behind it?
There are a number of factors, I guess, that we can identify already, but the research will investigate them further, of course. One is, of course, there is in some environments and some systems a very strong political polarization already in the system. So systems like the one in the US and the UK, to some extent in Australia as well, are usually built around two major party blocks, and so there is an inherent polarization already in there. There are two sides and they battle it out for supremacy, essentially, in politics. In other systems, you have less of that because you have European multi-party systems that are based more around consensus building and various parties forming changing coalitions over time. So in those systems, there's a greater incentive for parties to work together, for politicians to work together, rather than just to fight to be at the top. In other contexts, of course, you have polarization that might be around different matters. We've seen this in the UK with polarization right through parties on the matter of Brexit, for instance. We're seeing right now a lot of polarization, a lot of hyperpartisanship around the correct response to COVID and whether we should go into lockdowns, take vaccines and so on, what we should do in terms of economic and other policy around these sorts of issues. Some of that is not linked to party lines, but it actually really splits parties themselves apart as well. So we see these kinds of drivers. Of course, there are other factors, economics, other social and societal differences that might generate splits within society. So all of these have an impact. And then on top of that, often you have an exploitation of these divisions by populist politicians and others, potentially also by outsiders, of course, state actors, state intervention from other sources outside of the country, as it has been speculated that's been the case, of course, in the US as well.
Yeah, right. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
This is an ongoing research initiative, of course, and part of what we're doing here is also to really understand the impact of different media in all of this. So we'll be looking at mainstream media as well as social media. We'll be looking at new forms of media coming along as well, new platforms coming along and what impact they have. The project runs for 5 years, so we've got plenty of time to also look at new platforms and new forms of expression that might emerge during that time. If you think back 5 years, for instance, we didn't really have things like TikTok and Snapchat and so on. So there's every chance that new platforms will come along and might make a significant difference again too. So we're very interested to see with this how this plays out as the media environment itself continues to change and evolve, of course, and that itself will also have a really big impact on what we end up seeing in terms of the dynamics of this kind of polarization. So, watch this space. We're starting in earnest in early 2022, and we'll assemble a team of a number of postdocs and PhD students to really work with me to research this problem.
It's really great to hear about everything you're doing with the fellowship, and I'm very keen to see the outcome of all your research.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me here today, Dr. Bruns.
Thank you.
My name is Ella Holding-McGrath, and this is Real World News. See you next time.